As we make our way through various issues in the Bible, ethical issues, we've come to the environment. The issue is, what policies should governments adopt concerning the use and care of the environment? Well, the Bible has much to say. The original creation was very good, Genesis 1:31. Because Adam and Eve sinned, God placed a curse on the entire natural world. We see this in Genesis 3, verses 17 through 19. The earth would now contain thorns and thistles and many other dangerous and harmful things. Though God has allowed us to tamper with fallen nature, such as still having dominion over it, Genesis 1:28, we can use things like bug spray, we can use preparations for natural disasters like flood walls and so forth to help overcome the negative effects of a fallen world. God did not destroy the earth, but he left much that is good in it. Genesis 3:18, 1 Timothy 4, verses 4 and 5, all things created by God are good. 1 Timothy 6:17. And God promises a future time when the abundant prosperity of Eden will be restored to the earth. We see this in Romans 8:21, Isaiah 11, verses 6 through 9, Isaiah 55:13, Amos 9:13, Acts 3:21. There's wonderful days in the future in the new heaven and new earth. God now wants human beings to develop the earth's resources and to use them wisely and joyfully. Again, to have dominion over it. Genesis 1:28, Numbers 32:22 and 29, Joshua 18:1. Subduing the earth after the fall takes place. We see this in Genesis 3:18. Man still works it. He's just got thorns and thistles to wrestle with now, but he still works the earth. Romans 14, verses 2 and 3 speak to this, 1 Timothy 4:4, and elsewhere. Human beings are much more valuable in God's sight than animals. Clearly, Matthew 6:26, if the Lord is concerned for the sparrow and doesn't let one fall apart from his sovereignty, he's of much more concern toward humans created in his image. We should not use the earth in a wasteful or destructive way or intentionally treat animals with cruelty. Deuteronomy 20, verses 19 and 20, Proverbs 12:10, and Matthew 22:39, loving our neighbor and such. So we should use the resource of the earth as good stewards and as wise stewards. And we contrast the biblical view of earth with radical environmentalist view, where the radical view fails to evaluate many insignificant risks of danger in comparison to a certain promise of great benefits. We know that God created an abundant and resourceful earth from Genesis 1, and he created humans to have dominion over it and subdue it, to be able to utilize it for the good of society. Now, we see the current state of the earth's resources, and people ask, are we destroying the earth? There's no good reason to think we will ever run out of any essential natural resources. Just when they think we're about to run out of something like oil or gas, we find far more is available than what we ever thought of. The importance of using information from long-term worldwide trends rather than short-term local stories of disasters needs to be considered. Much of what global warming alarmists have done is just use a few local stories of disasters, and they think, oh, this is going to happen all over the world. There's long-term trends show that human beings will be able to live on the earth enjoying ever-increasing prosperity and never exhausting its resources. We know, for instance, the world population, that though there are over 8 billion people alive today, we should stabilize around 8 or 9 billion, or as high as 11 billion, because as nations increase in prosperity, birth rates decline. We see it happen in India and China, the two most populous nations on the earth, and yet they're starting to bring their numbers down because they're starting to prosper a bit more, and they're not having as many children as they did before. We also see land for growing food. It's not been significantly affected, and food production per acre has dramatically increased due to better farming methods and greater use of modern technology. Some people used to argue we're not going to have enough land. We do have enough land for farming. What about water? We currently use less than 70% of the annually renewable water on Earth. There's an incredible amount of water in the current usage of water in many countries, both through leakage and inefficient agricultural usage. Desalinization of water is becoming more and more economically feasible, where they take salt water and pull the salt out of it and make it drinkable. Clean air, economic developments leads to better air quality. Waste disposal, landfills can be kept safe and used for parks, and new technology cuts down on waste. Global forests has remained relatively stable since World War II. Species lost over the last 500 years, only about 0.06% of species have become extinct. Herbicides and pesticides create great health benefits, significantly higher food production, and less required use of land because they're killing off the animals and pests that would be eating up some of that food, and you have to therefore grow more food to cover for the humans. All of that, it's more productive in smaller amounts. And then life expectancy has doubled in many countries the last few decades, so that people are living longer, living with better health because they have better access to food and clean air and water and such. So we could also talk about energy resources and energy uses. Wind power is helpful, but it's unreliable. You have to depend on when the wind comes along. There's hydroelectric power, which is most of the good locations for dams are already in use. There's oil. There's enough oil to last for 5,000 years, but we need to reduce dependence on foreign oil, depending on what your country can produce. The U.S. should increase its use of alternative fuels where it's practical to do so, and the U.S. should develop more of its own supplies of oil when you're talking about the United States, but you can talk about it in different countries as well, wherever you're at. There's enough coal to last another 1,500 years. Natural gas is an excellent source of energy for home heating and to generate electrical power. Nuclear power is a wonderful source of energy. Solar energy is not economically competitive yet, but it is improving every few years. So the conclusion is we should utilize a variety of energy resources, especially those that are in abundance. What about global warming and carbon fuels? Well, the Earth's atmosphere brings both warming and cooling influences on the Earth. Warming effects from the atmosphere, like greenhouse gases like water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other gases. But there's also cooling effects from the atmosphere with evaporation, precipitation, and advection. So what is the controversy about carbon dioxide? It's based on hypotheses, but the best estimates of doubling it would only result in a 1 to 2 degree difference, which could be beneficial with less crop damage from frost. What about the Bible's teaching about the earth? Well, did God design a fragile earth or a resilient one? He clearly designed a resilient one. We see this not only in Scripture, we see it throughout history. And God promises to maintain stability in seasons and oceans. Genesis 8:22 and Genesis 9:11 and 15. God's going to take care of these things. He's going to bring seasons back and forth as a natural cycle. People displease God when they fail to acknowledge His control of the weather. Jeremiah 5:22 through 25 or Romans 1:18 through 25 because they think they've replaced the Creator with the creature. God did not design the earth so that we would destroy it by obeying His commands. He gave us commands in Genesis 1:28 to have dominion over and subdue it. And it would seem odd that He would then say, okay, now these guys are going to just obliterate it or destroy it. And global warming alarmists remove our motivation to thank God for His wonderful gifts of cheap, abundant energy resources. He created very good, Genesis 1:31. Psalm 24:1 talks about these things. Isaiah 45:18 and 1 Timothy 4:4. You know, even some of the alarmists of global warming have said in recent days, like Bill Gates, that it wasn't as serious as they thought it was. It's sort of a footnote. Most media doesn't carry that story because they want to keep that alarm going. What does the scientific evidence say about global warming? Scientific opinion is strongly divided about global warming. There's people on both sides. The Earth's temperature has fallen or remained steady for the past 15 years, which is a result not produced by global warming computer models. But it does show. Should the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change be trusted to have the last word? No, it's highly politicized. There's money involved on the politics. Are glaciers melting and sea levels rising? No. For though some glaciers melt, others are growing, and sea levels declined in the last half of the 20th century rather than grew to higher levels. What about severe weather and other claims about damage from global warming? They've not grown in intensity or frequency as evidenced by the last few years, including some of our last few years of hurricanes, not nearly as strong as they had predicted a few years ago. The benefits that come from increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is provides much more prolific plant growth. And the unacceptable loss of human freedom that would come with governmental control of energy use and increased threats of environmentalism toward democracy has been likened to communism threats in the late 20th century. The unacceptable cost of reducing our use of carbon fuels that would reduce human work and human economic progress and harm the world's poor to depend on more expansive energy sources. The conclusion is global warming alarmists are depending on poor scientific evidence. And we can say the same thing. We start looking at like how cars are and their stability and automobile mileage and so forth. Cap and trade, which is a plan by government to control energy use by capping carbon emissions, trading off factories or decommissioning vehicles. All that plays a part in these conversations. But the thing is, God has created a good earth and He calls us to take care of it. And it's not wrong to use the resources that He's provided us.